If you can talk to somebody who's 2 to 3 years ahead of where you want to be, and it's like, hey, how did you navigate this? And they usually are like, man, I made so many mistakes. I would do this. I would hire, a staffer sooner, 6 months sooner than you think that you need them. Or if you're not an outgoing networking type of person, I would hire a salesperson, and it's stuff that maybe you don't think about. And then you talk to somebody who's gone through it, and then you're like, oh yeah, okay. And you save yourself frustration, time, energy. So taking advantage of the network and learning from others, I think also is really important.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zengage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, welcome back to another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zengage. Joined today by Lucas Carroll, CEO of the Business of Senior Care. Lucas, welcome to the show.
Hey, David. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
It's really good to have you. For folks who are not familiar with you, and I see you everywhere at events and online and all that, but how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I own a company called the Business of Senior Care, as you said, and our little niche in the world is we help startups, change of ownerships or expansions into new states for home care agencies all across the country for licensing. So state licensing, compliance, policies and procedures, survey, all of the coolest and most fun aspects of home care agency. Joking, but yeah, we help many franchise networks, independents for non-medical home care, home health, and hospice.
One of the things that we were chatting about before the show that I thought was interesting is some of the other kinds of ways that home care agencies can diversify their service lines with things like a guide program, which is, a lot of the same kinds of services, but with different payer source, but also things like private duty nursing. And so talk about some of the other kinds of service lines or payer sources that people have gotten into that have made a big difference in their business, and some tips on how to set yourself up for success in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. So these kind of service offerings have just kind of naturally evolved. Where I used to run the day-to-day operations for a home care agency, a home instead franchise in Denver, and so just kind of seeing it from the inside for the operations. And then with this business, we get to work with a ton of startups that are all across the country, and they come from all walks of life. Typically, they don't come from home care, and they're wonderful people they're hungry for knowledge, and maybe don't necessarily know what payer sources are in this space for home care. And what has naturally evolved is a lot of conversation around, okay, you can help me with the home care license, but we would like to get as many different opportunities to get clients. How do we do that? I said, well, okay, there are veterans opportunities to get signed up. There's Medicaid programs. There's a newer program like the Medicare Guide program. And also, have you considered expanding your service line to do nursing services? Mm-hmm. Well, and then it just evolves into a really natural conversation like, well, what can a nurse do? And what do we have to do to get there from a licensing perspective, or to get prepared for our agency to be able to do that? And we're like, well, that's great. Those are good questions. You could, depending on how the license works in the state, you could hire a nurse and then start to offer to clients that you have currently that you want to keep, that you could bring onto your agency, that you could do things like medication administration, medication setup. You could do some insulin injections. You could do some IVs. You could start getting into wound care. There's this whole sliver between non-medical home care and home health that is blurring together, continues to blur together. But there's this huge opportunity for agencies to provide this service line and be able to charge a really good premium for it.
I'm kind of an amateur when it comes to the private duty nursing side of the business. I mean, this is just for anybody else who's in kind of my seat. I mean, this is not reimbursed by a payer like Medicare or Medicaid. This is typically private pay. Is this something that like a long-term care insurance would touch as well?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And it depends a little bit on the licensure in the state, but usually the target here is for private pay. It's not a service that's reimbursed by your big payers like Medicare and your insurance companies and things like that. But the agency is able to we do offer expansion into a full home health service line. If you wanted to be additionally a full home health agency and get paid by Medicare and that it's quite an extensive process to get there, but we certainly help there. Typically, the first natural step is to do this private duty nursing where you don't have to typically contract with any additional payers. You're usually just going straight to the client. And the situations where this happens is, let's say you have a client that is in a state where, as a home care licensed agency, the caregiver can't touch prescription medications,
Sure.
and the daughter or the family doesn't live in town, and they're asking you, "Hey, everything else is going wonderful with the service, but we don't have anybody there. The prescriptions need to be picked up once a week or they're delivered to the home, and we really just need to get them out of the packaging and get them into that weekly med minder.
Yep.
But we're not there to do it. Can you do it?" And they're just kind of caught in this, like, we would love to do it. We can't do it under our licensing, or maybe the licensing allows it, but they don't have a registered nurse on their team.
Hmm.
That that so it usually happens where you get these clients that are like, okay, what do we do? We could refer out to a home health company. You could hire a nurse privately. I mean, it could be a lot of additional consideration for the family. But if you had the additional licensing and then had this nurse set up private duty nursing, you could be like, yeah, that's no problem. And you could either do it as a value add, meaning that you don't charge additionally, you
Sure.
just have the nurse go out once a week, or you can get into some more medical services and start charging a premium service to do more and more of those medical. Also, it sometimes it happens when you have a client who you've had for some time and they're increasing in their sort of complexity,
Yep.
and they are getting to maybe having to move into a nursing home or assisted living or moving to an elevated level of care. But if you have private duty nursing, you can help them to stay home independently and performing some of those medical services for a bit longer. So there's a couple different ways to think about it that I think agencies could really benefit from.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. I want to transition to asking you, what kind of person are you? And in order to ask you that question, I'm going to ask where you fall in birth order and what that says about you as a person.
That's a good question. I'm middle, so they have a older brother, younger sister, and gosh, what does that say?
Same here, by the way. Middle, older brother, younger sister.
Yeah, I think, gosh, what it did for me as a middle child, probably I did learn a lot from my older brother and sort of looked to him for just direction on, what should we do next? What should we do? And then as I grew older and more independent, I kind of became just more responsible, I guess, if you could call it that,
Sure,
a bit more serious, a bit more, engaged in what I'm doing. So, and then looking out for my little sister. So
sure.
it's kind of this blend of like trying to be serious and trying to make sure that things get done, but then also looking to others for like advice and direction
Yep,
and like ideas. And then also trying to care for like a younger sister. So it's a really unique blend.
yep.
How about yourself?
I'm very much a like a peacemaker. I want to make sure everybody's good and that everybody's having fun. I feel like a lot of times, like, you kind of absorb like the emotional state of other people as your responsibility. I don't know if that's middle child or just some other kind of problem that I have as a human being, but that's at least how it's manifested for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty unique. Yeah, it's interesting to reflect on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to transition into a part of the show where I bring on successful people. So, congrats, and ask them about the big mistake that they've made in their career and what that mistake taught them about business or life. And so, anyways, Lucas, what's your big mistake?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I reflect on that question, it kind of started with stumbling into healthcare. I was attending law school as a first year law school student at Creighton University in Omaha. And I went through the first year, and there's not one thing that I liked about the whole experience.
Sure.
Of course, first year is difficult and all the things, but there was nothing that spoke to me as far as a redeeming, like, yes, I want to do this. I want to
Yeah.
pursue law down the road. So I kind of changed course and happened to get a position at the Home Instead corporate office in Omaha. It was legal in nature, so I didn't know if I was coming back, and so I was able to work with in the legal department
Yeah.
as a legal intern and met the wonderful people, most wonderful people. I worked directly for Jeff Huber, who eventually was CEO at Home Instead, and just had an awesome, amazing experience. So I kind of fell backwards into healthcare and then continued to work at the corporate office, learned a whole bunch of things about franchising and home care, and got to see all sorts of successful owners all over the country, all over the world with Home Instead. Learned a lot of things. And then we moved out to Denver, and then I was running the day to day operations in the Denver franchise. And so I absorbed, learned a lot, learned so much about home care. And the big mistake was kind of like I'd been in home care for healthcare for a number of years, and then I know I wanted to start my own business. And for years, I kept thinking, I have to start a business that's outside of healthcare and
Sure.
outside
Yeah.
of home care because it has to be new and different and fresh, and it has to be an exciting business model. And it took me years to just be like, why can't I leverage the experience and expertise and the mentors and the knowledge that I gained throughout this home care journey and do something in that's related to home care. So it took me a long time to
Yeah.
get there and just come full circle and then be like, okay, we did, licensing and compliance at the franchise level and have a general understanding of it. I'm sure I could learn more and work with smart people to help. And that's finally came full circle. And then like, yeah, okay, this makes sense. And then all these years of experience could really benefit. So that took a long time to get there.
Tell me, like, what was the moment that the puzzle piece kind of fell into place and you were like, oh, I could just do this here instead?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was this was just before the pandemic started, so it was in 2019. I was like, okay, I got to do something. I have to start a business, and I looked at virtual assistants business, and I thought of like a different type of franchise outside of home care. And then I remembered in Colorado they require all new administrators for home care agencies to take this 8-hour course, and you have to have this 8-hour course completed in order to first get your license, and then as you change administrators over time they have to have it before they can start as administrator. But the Department of Health in Colorado said you had to take it only from an approved vendor, an
Sure.
approved company.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to decide on what business, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put together an 8-hour course. Really, it's just going over home care regulations, and I'm just going to send it in to the department. And it was like a long series of slide decks for
Sure.
different, all of that. And I'm just going to work on it. So at my job, at nights and mornings, worked on this thing, and I'm just going to send it in. And then the Department of Health individual called me and said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for submitting the training. We haven't had anybody as a new vendor in like 2 years. We had nobody, and we have this very limited list of vendors. We're always looking for new people to help us to guide our home care agencies and home health agencies." And I was like, "What? I thought you were going to say, please don't waste my time
Right.
with sending in this stuff. I have a better stuff to do than review this information." So it was at that moment I was like, oh, okay. There doesn't appear to be a lot of other, companies or individuals that are interested in like compliance work, which it's
Yeah.
not the most exciting thing in the world. But to get that sort of reaction, and then I got, approved and on the vendor list, and then I started providing the training to existing home care and new home care agencies, and they were like, "Oh, thanks for the training, thanks for the information." It was just kind of like, "Oh, okay." It's kind of a unique knowledge set that I've
Sure.
just learned from being in the industry, and that people benefit from the knowledge base, and they're required to do the training anyway. So I was just kind of like, "Oh, okay. Well, why don't I just do this? This makes sense."
Yeah. It's a funny, like, why not me kind of question of like, somebody else has got to already be doing this at a high level. I'm sure the market's already saturated. And then finding out actually, like, there's nobody who's filling this niche in a way that either takes advantage of all the capacity in the market or like, there's people who can't get in elsewhere or don't connect with that. And so it's just a funny thing of like, oh, I figured this was already covered, but I guess it's not actually.
Yeah, yeah, that was very much my feeling. I was like, well, I'll give it a shot, and it's probably well versed with others,
Yeah.
and saturated market, and who could benefit from the experience that I've had,
Right.
with that. That's just kind of all the thoughts, and then when somebody calls and says that, and you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let me think about this.
Yeah. As you've worked with, startups and change of ownership and all that kind of stuff, what are some of the places you've seen that same kind of let's call it like emotional journey or whatever that you experienced play out in the way that they're thinking about approaching their business?
Yeah, that's a good question. We see people at the very beginning. Typically, if they're a franchise, they just signed the franchise
Sure,
agreement. They just made this huge leap. We see people at the very beginning. Typically, if they're a franchise, they just signed the franchise
sure.
agreement. They just made this huge leap.
Yeah,
You know, and maybe they just quit their full-time job and their
yeah,
career, or they're going too soon and they're excited and scared and worried and, nervous and all at the same time. And so we see this journey over, a few months to that we're typically the first vendor or individuals that really have contact with them because we
sure.
need to get started on the licensing application ASAP. And then by the time we get to the end of it and have their license and they get their doors open, and then when they get that first client,
Mm.
like you see this like sort of evolution of like, can I do this? Is my agency going to be successful? I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't come from this healthcare. And then like they get that first client and then they, super excited. Like they reach out to us and be like, you won't believe it. We had somebody that said yes.
Like, of course they did. Of course they said yes.
And I was like, yeah, of course you guys are going to rock it. And just to see that like light bulb,
Yeah.
go off when they're like, okay, yeah. I mean, I invested this money, time, effort, but these are the fruits of the labor to have an actual client.
One of my questions that I ask people typically when they're in the first like year, 18 months, 2 years of the business, because it just seems to me from outside looking in, talking to owners all day, every day, that home care is never easy, but the first 3 years are just really challenging. And so one of my questions that I'll often ask is like, have you like come to terms with the fact that you just made this giant mistake of opening this business? And they typically laugh and they're like, yeah. It's like, it's brutal right now, but like, I've got the compelling vision, like I've got the drive to get through it. And there's people who do and are super successful. But have you in your business had the moment of like, have I made a horrible mistake going down this route of entrepreneurship instead of like working somewhere else with a steady paycheck?
Yeah, I mean that's as a business owner,
Yes,
yeah,
I have.
yeah. I don't know if that feeling ever leaves you,
Yeah.
for what that is. It's the highs and lows. It's like some days you're like, okay, well, as an entrepreneur, I can make decisions on what I want to do today. And then other days is like, okay, we have all of these things to get done, and I'm the person that needs to either execute or
Yeah.
delegate on what needs to be happen. So it's like this roller coaster of yes, entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and then also, oh, let's wait, I'm the one that has to make sure everything gets done,
Yeah.
and then I can't submit, like a job. I'm taking Friday off, PTO request is
Sure.
submitted. That it's just it works a little bit differently. Like, who am I going to submit PTO request to
Yes.
for for taking a day off?
That's good and also bad, right? Who am I going to submit PTO request to? I.e., I can take off whenever I want, but like, who am I going to submit it to? Like, who's going to cover while I'm gone? Well, kind
Yeah.
of nobody. This is one of the reasons I really like my job is because the perfect startup employee is someone who would start a company but is too risk averse to do it. And so I love my job because I get to be close to people who are crazy enough to think that they can make this work, but I don't have to do it. And so I get to like feed off of their energy and gumption and just all the like energy that they bring to what they do, but I don't have to be the one holding the bag at the end of the day for there's no one to submit a PTO request to. So thanks for offering to let me feed off your energy a little bit. It's good stuff. Let's transition to a part of the show where I ask you about something that you think is totally underrated in the industry. People overlook it all the time, and it's really, really valuable.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the undervalue, and it's not like it's not a known item, but just the true value in relationship building in the
Mm,
industry. I think of like a new home care agency with their franchise or an independent, and the ability to develop relationships in your marketplace. It works the same for me in developing relationships with other businesses, with
mhm,
franchise networks, with like-minded people. But like a new franchisee or new agency, just continuing to develop relationships. The one that I talk about is developing relationships with other home care agencies who are, could be considered competitors to
mm,
you. And the initial response when we, working with new people is like, why would I do that? Why would I develop relationships? And you're like, well, let's paint the scenario. If you get a call, you're, 3 months into your business, you have 5 caregivers on your roster and you get a call for a 24-hour client and you can cover 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can cover less than half of that.
Sure.
You have available caregivers to cover half of those shifts.
Yeah.
What do you do? And if you have a relationship with one, two, three other home care agencies that are, they have good owners, they run good operations, and you can reach out to them for a lifeline and say, "Hey, I got this new client, super excited about it. I can cover half the shifts. Would you be able to help?" You pay for their services, but you can collaborate with them, take on the 24-hour client, look good, look professional as an agency because of your partnership. And that's just an example that they use in talking to new owners that plays out in so many different ways. I mean, this looking for not having an end game in mind
Yeah.
for when you want to develop a relationship with somebody, and just like, oh, I like this person, I like what they're doing, and I want to, just have learn about them. I want to learn about their business and what they're doing. Has For me has come back, and multiple times in a positive way, to be like, "Hey, I have this person that came to me looking for an agency to help them with licensure." And I remembered our conversation, and just the initiating of the conversation for me was not with an end game in mind for more business or something like that, but that has continued over my career about just having professional relationships, seeking out and developing professional relationships with companies, with individuals that you may not know the full what it could prosper, but
Mhm.
it's just important to continue those relationships.
Yeah, I think this is sales to me is a lot of times just kind of this weird magical kind of process to where you've got to keep investing energy into the thing all the time. But what's funny about sales, what's funny about business is that a lot of times where you get the return is not necessarily where you're investing your energy, but it's where you invested energy 6 months ago or 8 months ago or whatever. And so I think it's easy to try and draw a really like clear line between activity and results. But ultimately, like people do business with people they know, like, and trust. I know that's something that's repeated often. There's a reason it gets repeated all the time. And if you are able to kind of cultivate this kind of reputation of being somebody who's trustworthy, someone who's not transactional in nature, but is really like here to be of benefit to other people, to build genuine connection, like that's the kind of relationship that results in people reaching out to you and remembering what it is that you do and talking to you when it's relevant.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
The number of times I've had somebody who I talked to a year or a year and a half ago who come back and are like, "Hey, it was totally not a fit then. We had other stuff going on, but like we're ready to talk now." Is just you don't burn bridges in this business.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about a big mistake you made. What's a little mistake that you see home care owners make all the time, and if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better?
Yeah, good one, and I don't won't be earth shattering, but it's easy to say to hard to do. I have guilty of the same thing, but I think especially in the initial stages is trying to do everything yourself.
Mm,
Not letting other people help you. People want to help. There are other companies that want to help. There are individuals that want to help. There are, whether it's family, friends, church goers, neighbors, talking to them about starting your business. It's trying to take on everything and do everything. And
yeah.
it's easy for me to say that, but it's hard for me to do that because you want to make sure that everything gets done and gets done at a high level, and learning the art of delegation, looking for experts that have other companies that can help, whether it's software, whether it's operational efficiencies, whether it's employee engagement, like looking for companies that can help to support you to grow, and that where is the highest and best use of your time as an owner. And if it's focusing, typically in the beginning, it's focusing as much time as possible on sales, marketing, developing relationships, and doing that. And if you can find support for other ways, that will have real impacts on your business.
Like that's not brand new advice, but I think it just needs to be repeated so often because home care does not attract people who are looking to delegate by virtue of who they are as people. I mean, typically these are the folks who took ownership of the home care need in their own family first, and that's often how they found their way into home care as a business. And so I think one of the best things about home care owners that I talk to is that they are people defined by an extreme ownership kind of mentality. The buck stops with me. I'm going to take care of it. A lot of times, very servant leader types of people. But also, like the worst thing about home care owners sometimes is all of those things. They take extreme ownership, and for us, it's personal. It's too personal to them, and so relinquishing, letting go, finding people that they can trust with parts of the business that they're not good at, that wear them out, that aren't the highest or best use of their time. It's just hard. So that's something that needs to be continually cycled through people's brains. It's like, what's the stuff that I need to delegate for my personal health and work-life balance, for the health and growth of the business, so that I'm able to do something else instead of this. So it's good advice.
I also, as you were saying that too, is like anybody that's in a franchise network or if independent and you're able to find mentors in the space, is that absolutely would take advantage of having the network and just look at somebody that's 2 or 3 years ahead of where you are
Yeah.
and just ask them questions. I mean, they're entrepreneurs are ones that that typically just like to share their experiences,
Yeah.
and if you can talk to somebody who's 2 to 3 years ahead of where you want to be, and it's like, hey, how did you navigate this? And they usually are like, man, I made so many mistakes. I would do this. I would hire, a staffer sooner, 6 months
Yeah.
sooner than you think that you need them. Or if you're not an outgoing networking type of person, I would hire a salesperson, and it's stuff that maybe you don't think about. And then you talk to somebody who's gone through it and then you're like, oh, oh yeah. Okay. You save yourself frustration, time, energy. So taking advantage of the network and learning from others, I think also is really important.
Okay, as we wrap up here, we talked about a lot of mistakes, but I like to end every episode on a high note. And so tell me about something that's happened lately in your business that you're really proud of.
I think we talked about a little bit earlier, just like these natural and organic conversations we have with new owners of how can I grow my business? How can I expand? How can I obtain new clients and grow revenue? What has grown out of that is a couple different programs. The first one, which is about private duty nursing, is that we're working with a number of owners that we've worked with them on licensure for non-medical home care.
Yeah.
And then they're saying, what else? And then they come back and they're like, what else? How else could you help us? And then we have conversations like, well, depending on how licensure works in your state, have you considered, hiring a nurse onto your team? Or if you have a nurse, having that nurse be able to do services for you,
Sure.
for your clients, with things like medication administration, medication setup, even in some states allowed to do insulin injections. You could do IVs, you could do wound care. There's this kind of niche as a home care and home health have kind of blended together. It used to be very cut and dry. There's this kind of middle area with private duty nursing where you're not taking on payer sources like Medicare, commercial insurances, but rather you're charging the client privately. They would pay private pay to come out and have a nurse come out and do those medical services like
Sure.
medical administration. And a typical example that we hear from agencies is that we have this client things are going great, except they have prescription medications that come in once a week or once every couple weeks, and the family doesn't live close, and they need somebody just to set up the meds, take them out of the prescription bottles, and put them in a weekly med minder so that it's easy for mom to be able to take the medications. And based on the restrictions for the licensure in the state, they may not be able to do it. And they're like, we'd love to continue services, and they're like, well, how do I navigate this medication setup? What do I do? And like, well, you can get a home health agency involved, or you could have a private nurse come out and do it. These situations do happen for agencies, and if you have like a full-fledged private duty nursing, not only could you do that, but you could do the typical medical services that individuals have that come up, and just be able to keep it. Part of the goal is to keep clients that you have, and keep them independent in their home, or be able to take on clients that you wouldn't otherwise do. And some agencies do it as a value add, like the med setup, and they wouldn't charge for a service for that. But there are other services like wound care, injections, things like that,
Sure.
you could come up with an hourly rate or a per service rate, and that's a real additional service line that you can add revenue to your business.
Yeah. No, it's great that you've had people who trusted you with the first thing come back and do, additional kind of steps in the licensure process. Well, Lucas, thanks so much for making the time to chat today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
On behalf of the team here at Zengage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zengage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.